Nobody likes relief pitchers. Compared to their starting counterparts, they clearly don't get as much love. They don't get paid big contracts, they aren't represented well in the All-Star game, and it's nearly impossible for them to win the Cy Young Award. But why? Emmanuel Clase has an ERA of less than 1, leads the league in saves, is on one of the best teams in the league, and still, he will not win the award. On the outside, it looks like he's one of the best pitchers in the league. When you dive into it a little deeper though, you see that he's fighting a pretty heavy uphill battle. Relievers have won the Cy Young Award before, but the last time it happened was in 2003 when Eric Gagne of the Los Angeles Dodgers took home the award. So, what changed in the past 20 years to make it impossible in today's game? Well, that's what I'm here to find out today. Why can't relief pitchers win the Cy Young? By the way, only 2% of you watching this video are subscribed. If you like the video, consider subscribing. It's completely free, and you can always unsubscribe at any time. To get an idea of what makes a Cy Young Award winner today, let's look back on the last 5 years. We have Garrett Cole, Blake Snell, Justin Verlander, Sandy Alcantara, Robbie Ray, Corbin Burns, Shane Bieber, Trevor Bauer, Justin Verlander again, and Jacob deGrom. 7 of these seasons have something in common. They led their respective leagues in B-WAR. This makes sense since B-WAR is a number that represents how valuable a player is to his team. So the most valuable pitchers typically are going to be at the top of the Cy Young voting. When we look at the WAR leaders by year, they are very rarely not winning the Cy Young or at least finishing as the runner-up. Mike Minor was the only one in the past 5 years to not finish in the top 2. It's pretty clear that in this day and age of statistics in baseball, B-WAR is a good statistic to use to predict Cy Young Award winners. Now that we know this, let's look at every single Cy Young Award winner in history and compare them using their B-WAR. Right away, you can kind of see that this data takes a funnel shape where it starts out with a wide spread of WAR and then narrows down as you go further on in time. There's a pretty interesting explanation for this, and I will get into that a little bit later. For now though, this is quite a bit of data and it's hard to draw any more conclusions from this. Let's focus on some of the least valuable Cy Young seasons of all time, pitchers who finished with less than 5 WAR but still got the award. There were 9 times where a reliever won the Cy Young Award, and all 9 seasons fall under this category. Bruce Sutter, Willie Hernandez, Raleigh Fingers, Mark Davis, Sparky Lyle, Mike Marshall, Steve Bedrosian, Dennis Eckersley, and the aforementioned Eric Gagne. These 9 seasons all finished with under 5 WAR. One thing that clearly stands out to me when looking at this graph is the line you can draw right about here, where all of a sudden the frequency of these lower WAR Cy Young winners drops significantly. The only winners to the right of this line are Eric Gagne, a reliever, the 2 2020 winners in the 60-game season, and 2 of the most controversial winners since the turn of the century in Bartolo Colon and Rick Porcello. The reasoning behind this is pretty simple. More advanced metrics started to pick up in popularity around the league, and WAR was one of them. It wasn't just about wins and ERA anymore. Voters and fans were starting to care more about the overall value a player provided rather than a few basic stats that didn't really do a great job at evaluating a player's performance. This leads to very few winners that have low WAR like these guys do. That also explains this funnel phenomenon that we saw in this graph. The Cy Young winners aren't going to be down here anymore because those seasons are not valuable enough. There isn't any more up here because these outlier seasons that we saw before are a lot harder to achieve in the modern game. The gap between the best pitcher in the league and a replacement level one is smaller on average. There are so many good pitchers in the league, it's kind of hard to stand out that significantly anymore. So we've established that in order to win the Cy Young in today's game, you need to be a valuable player. Starting pitchers are seemingly much more valuable than relievers. They get the big contracts, they get the recognition, and they get the Cy Young Awards. But why? What makes them so much more valuable than a reliever or closer? A closer pitches arguably the most important times of a game, so shouldn't they be a little bit closer to them? A big factor in calculating a player's value is the amount of time that a player plays. This makes sense. Think of a player that gets injured halfway through the season and misses half of the year. They aren't going to be as valuable as a player that played all 162 games. Closers these days don't pitch nearly the same amount of innings that starters do, but it wasn't always this way. Here's a graph of the highest innings pitched each season by a closing pitcher. I defined a closing pitcher as a pitcher that never started a game and got at least 10 saves in that season. It doesn't take much of a mathematician to see a trend here. Clearly, closing pitchers are pitching a lot less than they used to 50 years ago. In today's game, the top closer in terms of innings is going to be right around 80, and it seems to have flattened out as of now. Starters, on the other hand, are still out there pitching 180, 190, even 200 plus innings every single year. The top starting pitcher in the league typically pitches over 2 times the amount of innings than the top closer. Of course, this huge gap in innings is also going to lead to a huge gap in value. Here is a graph of the most valuable starting pitcher versus the most valuable relief pitcher in each season. The data in the 1900s is a lot more noisy and the relievers are sometimes very close to the starters, but around 1990, you can see this gap between the two really start to establish itself as the starters and relievers evolved into what we see today. And if we overlay that with the innings graph, you can see that the value gap corresponds pretty well with the drop of the innings by relievers. So WAR is a pretty good indicator of who's going to win the Cy Young, and there is a significant gap in that stat between starters and relievers. The relievers have much less value. So now you can see the uphill battle that relievers are fighting to win this award. Let's take a look at the case for Emmanuel Clase in 2024. Clase's stats in the season look very good. He has a 0.63 ERA, a 659 ERA plus, over 57 innings with a whip of 0.663. His strikeout rate is rather pedestrian at 23.5%, which is not typical of your elite closer. He instead pitches to contact with a walk rate of just 3.4% and a ground ball rate north of 60%. His BWAR, though, is only 3.4, which actually isn't even the highest value for a reliever. Tanner Scott of the Padres has more with 3.8. When we take a look at the WAR leaderboard amongst AL pitchers, Clase is actually tied for 7th. Based on past results, this doesn't bode well at all for Clase winning the Cy Young. Leading the pack is Tarik Skubal, who is the current favorite to win the award, unsurprisingly. His ERA plus of 169 and FIP of 2.66 both lead the AL in terms of starting pitchers. His 30.8% strikeout rate is tops in the league as well, and 7 percentage points higher than Clase. His walk rate is also extremely low at 5.4%. Overall, Skubal has been one of the most dominant starters not only in the American League but in all of Major League Baseball. He's also pitched 155 innings, almost 3 times as much as Clase. So not only is he ranked near the top amongst starters like Clase is amongst relievers, he also has done it over a significantly larger body of work. Don't get me wrong, Clase's having a great season and he's a big reason why the Guardians have been so successful, but frankly, he's just not nearly as valuable as Tarik Skubal, or Garrett Crochet, or Cole Ragans, or Seth Lugo, or Tanner Houck for that matter. And it really isn't his fault, that's just part of the job of being a relief pitcher today. But 21 years ago was the last time a pitcher was awarded with the Cy Young, and I would be remiss if I didn't go back and investigate that. It was 2003, and Eric Gagne was having a great season as the closer for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So good, he ended up winning the Cy Young. But if this season happened 20 years later, he would not have won it. It would have either gone to Jason Schmidt or Mark Pryor. If you take a look at these 3 players' numbers, it's pretty clear who was the least valuable. Jason Schmidt had an ERA plus of 180, a sub-1 whip, and pitched over 200 innings. Pryor edged him out in the BWAR category by 0.7 and was actually double Gagne's WAR. In 2003, these more advanced metrics were starting to make their way into the league, but they were far less mainstream than they are today. That is especially clear after you look at who finished 4th in the voting. That was Russ Ortiz, who got there solely because he had 21 wins thanks to playing for the powerhouse Atlanta Braves. He led the league in walks and had just 2.2 WAR, not exactly Cy Young material today. Gagne won the award mostly because of his 55 saves that he recorded. Saves, much like wins, don't really evaluate a pitcher's performance. Gagne converted all 55 save opportunities he had that season, which is impressive, but if he played for the Tigers, who won just 43 games, getting 55 saves would be impossible since the team has to win to record a save. It would be unfair to evaluate closers based on their saves since ones on winning teams have a huge advantage in that stat. In 2003, saves were looked at as this measure of success for a closing pitcher. In 2024, we now know that that's not entirely true. Here's a little fun fact. In 1987, Jeff Reardon finished 8th in the Cy Young voting and 11th in the MVP voting solely because of his 31 saves. He had a 4.48 ERA, over 80 innings, and finished 11th in the MVP voting. Stats were valued differently in that era. Saves still held that same value in 2003 when Gagne won the award. In 1992, Dennis Eckersley won not only the Cy Young but also the AL MVP as a closing pitcher. Surely he had one of the most dominant reliever seasons of all time, right? Well, no. He stole the award from both Roger Clemens and Mike Mussina, who both put up seasons worth over 8 BWAR. Eckersley recorded 51 saves, which won him the award. If this were done over again in 2024, he would have not won the Cy Young, and definitely would come nowhere close to the MVP. These guys would never have a chance at winning the award today because saves don't give you this huge boost anymore. Thanks to years of research and new statistical developments, we now know that it's kind of unfair and statistically it doesn't make much sense to value stats like those. It's just a tough time to be a relief pitcher. Unfortunately, the job of a relief pitcher in 2024 is a very underappreciated one. This is rooted in the fact that they don't have enough volume to go up against the big-name starters. With these advanced value-based statistics like WAR gaining more and more mainstream attention every year, relief pitchers' true value is being realized more and more by fans. The only way a relief pitcher is going to take home the Cy Young anytime soon is if they're pitching multiple innings per outing, and they also have to be very dominant while doing it. Although the chances of that happening anytime soon are slim to none. Velocity is going up, pitchers' workloads are going down, there's more resting than there's ever been in the game. Having a relief pitcher throw over 100 innings just isn't realistic in today's game. If a front office saw that a great relief pitcher is capable of throwing over 100 innings in a season while still being productive, well then, they would just convert him to a starting pitcher. A good starting pitcher is in much higher demand than a good reliever. Even Major League Baseball knows this struggle that relievers face, and their most recent effort to recognize them was creating their own separate official award for Reliever of the Year in both the AL and NL in 2014, appropriately naming the NL award after Trevor Hoffman and the AL award after Mariano Rivera. This is a similar reason to why the Cy Young was first introduced, as more valuable position players were dominating the MVP award, so pitchers got their own. This is a pretty good first step, but this award itself doesn't get much attention either. When the MLB awards are announced, most people are focused on the MVPs, Cy Youngs, Rookie of the Year, even Silver Slugger and Gold Gloves before the Reliever of the Year. So maybe the only thing left to blame is us, ourselves, the fans. It's all our fault. We don't talk about relief pitchers. We care more about the starters. Maybe it's on us to make the change. The harsh reality is that relief pitchers aren't going to win the Cy Young Award. In today's game, it's not just about ERA, it's not just about saves, it's about the value that a player brings over a season. And unfortunately for relievers, that value is often limited by the role that they play. Emmanuel Clase is having an incredible season, but the odds are stacked against him because of the way the game has evolved. But maybe it's time we change the conversation. As fans, we have the power to recognize and appreciate the critical role that relievers play in a team's success. They don't have to win the Cy Young Award to be crowned as valuable players amongst fans. If we start talking about it more, who knows? Maybe one day the Reliever of the Year award will hold the same weight as the Cy Young Award. We'll just have to wait and see. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.